Lovely job. Good afternoon and welcome to the Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service Risk-Based Inspection Programme Inquiry. The inquiry is being held virtually via online meetings using Microsoft Teams. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending today's witness evidence gathering session. I'm Councillor Carolyn Rule and I'm the chairman for the inquiry, and I'm joined by my fellow inquiry members, Councillors Martin Alvey, Dominic Fairman, Matt Luke and John Simmons. We are supported today by Justin Sharp, Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service Area Manager, Head of Community Risk Reduction, and also Joe Heather, our Democratic and Governance Officer, who is managing and overseeing the process. The witness evidence gathering sessions are not being held in public, but recordings of each session will be made available on the inquiry's area of the Council's website for viewing by the public. Other Cornwall councillors who are not part of the inquiry are able to join the sessions as observers. The objectives from the inquiry terms of reference are as follows. 1. To consider whether the current assessment of risk is an appropriate model for Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service. And 2. To consider the future allocation of resources to deliver Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service's overarching protection role, including statutory and non-statutory activities, and the primary authority role. Domestic properties and prevention and response activities are not included in the scope of the inquiry's work. The inquiry process consists of a number of recorded witness evidence gathering sessions, supported by informal organisational sessions, background briefing information, an initial informal introduction session, and an informal virtual site visit to Parkhouse Flats in St Austell. The recorded witness evidence gathering sessions comprise of us virtually receiving evidence from witnesses who have particular experience, knowledge and expertise to help us. We value the input of all the witnesses who give up their valuable time to take part in our process and thank them for their input. The witnesses in attendance today are Alan Hampshire, Cornwall Council's Service Director for Communities and Public Protection, and Stuart Benson, Cornwall Council's Head of Business Standards and Registration. We were supposed to be having Glenn Kaplan-Gray, who is Cornwall Council's Service Director for Economic Growth and also the Chief Executive of the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Local Enterprise Partnership, but Glenn has tendered his apologies at the very late stage of this morning and is not with us, I'm afraid. But I'm grateful that the other witnesses have managed to rejig their calendars and help us out by backfilling that space. Nick Kelly is also here, Cornwall Council's Food and Health and Safety Manager and Chairman of the Events Safety Steering Group. And from Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service, we have Graham Hughes, who's the Business Safety, Petroleum and Explosives, Des O'Connell, Station Manager, Service Delivery West Command, and Darren Vincent, Watch Manager, Protection West. With regard to the questioning of our witnesses, the process for each will be the same. Each witness will be asked to very briefly introduce themselves, and then the inquiry members will ask them a series of questions. Only the inquiry members may ask the witnesses questions. Other members in attendance online who are not part of the inquiry are able to observe the proceedings, and I will give them the opportunity to comment at the end of each witness session, although if time becomes tight, this may need to be at the end of the session as a whole. Due to limited time, I will ensure that questions and answers are kept as succinct as possible, particularly as there could be supplementary questions based on responses to other questions. Further written clarification may be sought if necessary. All questions and responses are to come through me as the chairman. Once witnesses have finished giving evidence, they are more than welcome to stay online for the remainder of the meeting as an observer. The evidence from the sessions will be used to support the inquiry's findings and recommendations, which will be reported back to Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny Committee as the parent committee for approval on the 21st of January 2021 and onward recommendations to the Cabinet for consideration on the 10th of February 2021. Before we go to our witnesses, there was an action from our last session on the 4th of November 2020, where we asked Dave Pilling of Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service to advise us of how many fire safety audits had been undertaken since the introduction of the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order of 2005. And I've been advised that Dave has provided that information to Justin Sharp, our technical officer for the inquiry. So Justin, please could I come to you so you could advise us of Dave's response so that it's on record? Over to you, please, Justin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I can advise that Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service have conducted 5,647 audits across Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly since the introduction of the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order in October of 2006.
Thank you very much. That's quite a lot, isn't it? That's a good number. Thank you. That's lovely. Right, so now we may make a start on the agenda that you've all got in front of you. So can I start off, please, with the Cornwall Council representative, which is Alan Hampshire, and Stuart Benson. I think you're going to do a bit of a double act. So maybe if one question you might both answer it, or you may find that one is better than the other, or whatever. Do it as a double act if that's okay. So welcome to Alan and Stuart. And we start off, the first question is from Dominic, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, gentlemen. And this question, I guess, will be for both, for each of you, actually. What engagement with Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service do you and your team currently have? And Alan, I'll go to you first.
Okay. Thank you, Dominic. I suppose to give a bit of context, it's not just about now, but maybe since the start of the unitary actually, is my service and the teams within the service have got, I think, significant engagement with the Fire and Rescue Service, and have done over the last 11 years of the unitary. We are a part of my service that's probably relevant for today are the public protection services, so regulatory services, or also known as enforcing authority, and they include areas such as trading standards, environmental health, licensing, port health, and these services, these functions sit alongside the fire and rescue protection functions as an enforcing authority, and as such, and have done for the last 11 years. And as such, we do have, I think, day-to-day, interactions with the Fire and Rescue Service as a key partner and a fellow enforcing authority, if you like, and probably right throughout the service. So at officer level, right up to heads of service and service director level on a very regular basis. And just to be really clear, actually, our two services, so Communities and Public Protection and the Fire and Rescue Service, actually formed its own directorate at one stage for 3 to 4 years, a few years ago. So we are quite well versed with each other, lots of interactions on a professional relationship basis throughout the service, and certainly at service director and head of service level. And just to give you another feel for how we come into contact with each other as well, maybe officially, will be obviously the fire service is also a statutory consultee in terms of licence applications. So actually the function that is delivered by one of the functions delivered by our public protection services is licensing. So they would the fire service would be engaged very regularly on a whole raft of licence applications as a matter of course. Also in terms of that engagement, in terms of how we would make sure we have proper compliance and enforcement with licence conditions, then we also would work together, licence compliance teams, environmental health officers, also working with fire safety officers in making sure those licence conditions are enforced and enacted. So that will be a regular engagement within the service. Also, the fire service is a consultee and a partner in advising on event safety, and event safety is something that within my service, the public protection services, we coordinate how we give a good advice to event organisers on all the different events, and clearly there is a lot of engagement with the fire service as a key partner and key consultee in that whole process as well. So there's two quite official ways where we engage, as well as clearly being very closely linked with how we regulate businesses on a raft of different issues across the board, as well on a day-to-day basis. One other maybe key part of our engagement between the two services is as part of enforcement and making sure we have compliance with regulations, whether they're fire safety, whether they are food safety or health and safety at work or environmental regulations, is actually how we support businesses and actually putting out information and guidance and support to businesses of how they can comply is really important. We found that's a really important way of getting compliance, is actually support and assist and inform business of how to do that. And our two services have been worked, I think, really closely over the last probably 11 years, but more so over the last 5-6 years, in really coming together to provide a single business support offer to businesses around different regulations in general. So there's a lot of engagement about how we would inform and support businesses with different products or services or seminars. I think probably on a very regular basis. So I hope that's a bit of a long-winded answer.
No, thank you for some of the history. I hadn't realised that you're all part of the same directorate in a previous time.
Absolutely.
Do you think, just touching on that one point, do you think anything was lost by the restructuring that happened at that point?
I mean, the good news now is that we're still part of the same directorate. It's just slightly wider. But we did have a close relationship, and we had to have a close relationship then, all part of the same directorate under the Chief Fire Officer, actually. I think, I hope that we haven't lost anything in the shape that the directorate now takes, because I think we've actually got other services that are also really relevant, like environment services that are really relevant to both fire service and public protection services as well. So I don't think we have lost that level of engagement or understanding of each other. So that so no, I think it's.
No, thank you for that. Stuart, would you like to add anything to Alan's answer?
I don't want to repeat things, Councillor Furman, but things that stand out to me are commonalities. Health, safety and wellbeing. Of course, both services are certificated to the 18,001/45,001 standards. So we've got, again, there's a sort of common culture, I think, across the two services around health and safety. We work together or have worked together closely on primary authority, and Fire and ourselves have a joint group to discuss primary authority partnerships. The one that obviously has to stand out is COVID, isn't it? The COVID response. So we've come together through the enforcement cell and now the safe recovery work stream, and are really sort of collaborating and cooperating on protecting Cornwall from the further spread of the pandemic. I think that we'd leave it at that. I think in the past we've really been able to focus on close working relationships. Whether there's room to amplify that again? Question mark.
Well, that might be somebody else's question. I'll leave it there.
Thank you both for such full answers there. As you said, as Dominic said, you may well have answered some of the other questions that we've got coming up, but we'll plough through them anyway because it gets them onto the record then. The next question is from Matt Luke, please.
Yeah, I think mine's already been answered, but there we are.
Still ask it again, Matt.
I'll ask it again. Hi, Alan. Hi, Stuart. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Right, I'll give the question because and you might be able to answer. Do you feel the level of engagement and support from the Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service is appropriate? Well, you've kind of answered that already. If not, how could it be improved? I'll give you that question both, perhaps.
Yeah, I think maybe shall I start again? I'll start and then Stuart will come in with the intelligent answer afterwards. But it is good engagement. It is appropriate, but it can always. I think there is. I think as Stuart mentioned, we have. I think some consistent understanding of things like risk. And targeting our resources and the like, I think is common to both of us. Probably the one thing that can always get in the way of better engagement, and that is whether there's the capacity there to do it. So what level of capacity have of officers at all different levels, whether that's my level or Stuart's, or probably more importantly the frontline services, is there the time to adequately go and speak to colleagues when we know there are issues that we might need to resolve? So we certainly haven't had, in terms of attitude or approach, or the principles that underline the services, I think there's always been a really genuine want to work together for common aims, protecting the public, protecting the environment, and supporting businesses. I think that's always been there. So the only thing that can get in the way and has possibly got in the way in the past is whether individual officers at different levels have that capacity always be able to pick up the phone or have that conversation, or always attend certain meetings, whether they be discretionary or whatever. That's the thing that is probably the biggest, can be the biggest blocker, and that's probably consistent for any level of engagement anywhere. So what I would say that there's, yes, we can always do better, can't we, in terms of making sure that we put the extra bit of time in, and it's not just from the fire service out, it's from my service in as well. So so that would probably be the constraint for better engagement, and certainly not anything to do with the want or the will to be working more closely together.
Okay, yeah, Stuart.
Yeah, I agree with what Alan has said there. There's definitely a will to cooperate. I do wonder whether there's room just to be clear about some of our common priorities, given that we are we are two parts of a single regulatory system. So, what are our commonalities? What are the priorities, and can we focus together a little bit more on delivering those priorities? So COVID is clearly one, but the primary authority possibly is another, as a non-statutory one. And making sure that we're working together to support companies with a kind of bundle of regulatory support through primary authority, where fire safety is one of the top needs for businesses. Yeah, so I think there's possibly we could relook at that and think of it in terms of what are the top priorities for us, and also, are we mapping highest risk in terms of business enforcement and business regulation? Because, a poorly managed or unsafe business in respect of fire safety is, there's a good chance that it's poorly run or managed in terms of health and safety or food safety, if it's a food premise, and there are other common risks out there. So we've got an aging population, so through our demographics we've got similar issues. There's a preponderance of holiday premises in Cornwall that including the great increase in Airbnb and other online property lettings that pose potential risks across the board. So maybe there is some room there for us to re-look at some of those and refocus on them.
Yeah, thank you both for full answers again there. You may find that some of these come out in questions as we're going through some of these points you're making, and then there's the catch-all questions at the end. So if we've missed anything that you need to raise that we should get into the inquiry details, that would be good. You can bring them in then if possible. The next question is from John, please.
Yes, thank you. Could you tell me what benefits do Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service bring to your service and groups?
Thank you for that question. Should we switch the order this time? So rather than me hogging all the easy bits, then now let's Stuart start, and I'll come in on the rear. Should we try that?
Next bit of thinking time. I've always thought that one of the things that the fire service do give us is a certain amount of credibility. They're a blue light service, and have a position, for example, within the LRF, within that sort of emergency management world, and an engagement with the police service and others. So I think there's something there. There's a sort of good link up with fire, and just that sort of image and good practice that they have in terms of engaging with that world, which some of us, I mean, you know, as have less experience of. So we've certainly taken advantage of that in respect of some of the COVID risks, particularly when we were looking at in summer at the reopening of of lessening of restrictions and reopening of the high street. There were a lot of worries then, and we were gaining access to the LRF to talk about those. So I think that's definitely one advantage. I mean, there are others around the potential to share equipment as well. So we're in conversation with the fire service about sharing their rib on the fowl to do some shellfish sampling, which we need to do in order to maintain the shellfish bed classifications. Also looking to utilise the Tolvaden CCTV and the mobile CCTV. Again, thinking about COVID risk management, particularly after this initial month. I hope it's no more than a month of things being closed down again. Is that enough, Alan?
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Stuart. And so without trying to obviously duplicate what Stuart has said, the credibility words come out there. So one thing I'll just add to that is absolutely one thing that in terms of regulating businesses and how we deal with the public as well as businesses, credibility, trusted, absolutely. The fire service bring a level of trust, absolutely, and that can open doors, and sometimes open doors, whether that's to individuals or whether to businesses, probably more than any other service in this authority, because they are trusted and they've obviously got a long history, and you know, people of the fire service, they put their lives on the line to actually help people. So that gives them a level of trust and I think respect from the public that shouldn't be underestimated. And that can be really helpful in a whole raft of situations where we may be working alongside from a regulatory point of view to deal with a whole range of different issues. One that comes to mind for me was Menorca, an area where we obviously got a complex, effectively a park home site with lots of vulnerable people on there, and many migrants who were living there as well. It was a pretty unregulated site to start with, but actually we need to get in. We need to make sure people were protected. There were a whole raft of issues, and a real good way in to speaking to people on that site and to dealing with people on that site was actually via the fire service. That was our way in because they were trusted, and so just I think just an illustration of how that level of credibility and trust and respect can be used in really difficult circumstances to bring about really good results. One other thing that in terms of benefits that the fire service bring, I think as an authority, as a unitary, we do have the opportunity to have, and I think we have it, we've got a unique selling point. We're a big authority. We provide a range of regulatory support, as well as the full range of enforcing authorities for food safety, health and safety, fire safety, environmental protection, the like. And we can be, and we are, a one-stop shop for businesses to come and trust us and get good advice. And I think the fire service are a key part of that. We can only be a one-stop shop if all of those different regulators or enforcing authorities work together in order to do that, and the fire service certainly do, alongside ourselves, and therefore I think we've got a really good reputation as a unitary authority to provide that level of business support that I think is trusted and goes well beyond our borders, actually, and that's why we have a range of different organisations right around the country who come to us for primary authority advice, but that we have that because we work together between the fire service and public protection services. So maybe that's just something else to add. Okay,
Thanks, Alan and Stuart. Thank you. The next question is from me. How could the sharing of information between your service and groups and between your service and groups and Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service improve? Do the differing databases that are used within the council create a barrier, and if so, how?
I'll start really simply, and I'll let Stuart again do the maybe the more detailed bit. The answer is yes. It could always improve, but do databases and the like create a barrier? Absolutely yes. I think there's been quite a lot of work nationally as well as locally about how we could we actually join up, for example, our databases of different premises based on risk. Actually, we before we become a unitary, we piloted something nationally called a retail enforcement pilot to see whether we could join up between environmental health, trading standards, licensing, and the fire service to see whether it was maybe of benefit to share information and then therefore to see if there's a level of joining up we could do. I think the conclusion to that pilot, and Stuart I think was probably more involved in it than I was, and may want to comment more. It's actually the databases really do get in the way. They're not easy. The fire service have their own database, and it's based on, I think, probably national. And Justin will be able to give more information on national databases and the like as well. Whereas it's very different from the ones that we use, and it is not easy just to share that information across those two databases. So I think several attempts at looking at that nationally have happened, and they never have come to anything. So it is difficult, and it is a significant barrier. That said, the way we share our information in reality is by we act as is for each other when we're out doing visits. So when we're doing food visits and we see that there's a potential fire risk due to a greasy extractor fan or whatever it is, or the way things have been stored, then we would be on the phone after those inspections to our fire colleagues to say there may be a high risk thing that you might want to have a look at, and vice versa. So I think there is a on the ground sharing of intelligence and information, and asking each other to support where necessary. But I think it is made extremely difficult by the fact we run different databases, and actually nationally there is an expectation for different levels of information, and risk is actually dealt with on maybe a slightly different way as well between the different services. So it is difficult to join up the databases. I think that is very complex, and it's probably been tried in different parts of the country, but I think with I haven't seen any areas where it's been particularly successful. But we try to get around that by the practical on the ground sharing of information and being eyes and ears and hazard spotting for each other.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Stuart, did you want to add to that?
I haven't got a lot to add. I think somebody really well. Yeah. Retail enforcement part was too ambitious. It tried to lever in all sorts of questions for different professional groups and became unmanageable, and the intelligence but databases just couldn't support it. I do think there is eyes and ears. Food officers on food premises can look at uncleaned extractor fans, which can be a fire hazard and things like that, and do. I only sort of thought is whether we could have a sort of cut down version of agreed common areas, and maybe that's something we could do that wouldn't be too onerous. Mapping high risk premises right across the board would be, without a database to do it, would be really onerous, I think.
Thank you. Dominic, you had an extra question.
Yeah, just a quick one if I may, Carolyn. So we did have earlier witnesses were Helen and Sophie, who were, as a term, Green Book staff. Employed by the council, I guess. Not only did they highlight the databases, they also highlighted their personal IT equipment as not being up to the job of handling some of these large databases. Is that an issue within your directorate, and there are any solutions coming forward?
Databases generally, for the size that we use, are an issue. we had an issue. We brought in a new database for the public protection services. So to bring together all the environmental health information, trading standards, licensing was a massive task back in 2009, and those databases never fully suited all areas of the business. It was always a compromise because it's also shared with the planning service. We got an IDOCS database, so it's a compromise from the start, which never suited all areas. Ever since, we've been trying to see how we can update that and make it more cloud-based, more accessible by officers who are out and about doing their inspections, and it's been a big struggle. It is genuinely a struggle to get the right equipment to allow officers to be more fleet of foot and to be able to input and access data on site. So to do that just within one service, and that be a struggle, it makes it, in terms of how you do that and share that across fire as well, and to make sure everyone's got the same information, obviously is exacerbated considerably. So actually, the level of data that's needed and the complexity of that data does make it difficult to be able to use and deploy the right type of equipment at the right time. Yes.
Thank you. Next question is Martin, please.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning. Sorry, good afternoon, gents. Been a long day.
Afternoon.
Again, this is something that has already been touched on a little bit, but in relation to the primary authority scheme and the partnerships Cornwall Council has, is the level of engagement and or support from Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service appropriate?
Do you like, if I start from a high level perspective, and then maybe if Stuart could hone in on more of the detail, because Stuart is responsible for that scheme. An area of real success for us as an authority has been primary authority, because that shows that firms come to us because they trust us to get their assured advice from us, and they want it just from us. And that can be for firms who have sites all around the country, or can just be in Cornwall as well. And we've got a lot of different national associations and big firms who come to us for that advice. And we have I think a unique selling point. We're really good at hospitality, really good at the food industry. That said, I think we've been trying to resource that scheme and trying to take on relationships with businesses in a really positive way. But there has been times I'm aware of where resourcing, and certainly fire resourcing, has possibly got in the way of that, and where we've had to turn some businesses away to say that we can't do it. And I think probably Justin and other members of the fire service would be the first to probably agree with that. So there is a bit about saying we think we've got a unique selling point. We're good at this. It is an area where we can recoup our costs. It can be cost neutral if we do it in the right way. But there's probably a little bit of an invest to save in there to start with. And I think we could do more. And I think possibly the fire service could do more with public protection services alongside, because what we really want is primary authority relationships with large firms, but who use all our services. They can choose to just have food safety, or choose just to use us for health and safety, or for environmental issues, or just for fire safety. But I think the real power of primary authority relationships is to say, come to us for all of your regulatory needs. And we can't necessarily do that to the extent, I don't think, that as we would like at the moment. And I think we need probably the fire service, but probably also my service as well, may need to invest in that, because actually for the future, that's a really powerful way of getting compliance, and a way that is ultimately should be cost neutral. So I think we can do more on primary authority, and I think and that includes the fire service possibly investing more in it up front before they get those costs back, because we can charge an hourly rate for it. That's my take on it. But Stuart, do you have a different view?
I can only agree with you, Alan. I think that if the fire service were able to dedicate some staff and a bit more resource to primary authority and to the business regulatory support hub, that sort of single point of contact for businesses itself, which has been funded in the past, I think that would be really beneficial I mean, Primary Authority works by us entering into a contractual arrangement with the business to provide business support that's set out in a work plan, and it does become very difficult in terms of managing that relationship if one or other of the providers cannot deliver what is being asked for. You know, it kind of undermines the whole. So it would be fantastic if the fire service could are able to relook at that. I know it's because of other, you know, lots and lots of competing demands pulling resources away, but you know, also to have continuity, you know, to have a lead person or a couple of leads who stay there for a while. Sometimes a little bit of toing and froing, a little bit of chopping and changing, and again, that's just competing demands, isn't it? So you know, we understand that totally.
I know when we spoke about this to some of our earlier witnesses, one of their comments were around the statutory duties of the fire and rescue service and the fact that they can't charge for those. It was suggested actually, Alan, that you might be able to help them in getting their head around that thorny subject of what they can actually charge for and what they can't.
Thank you for that, and I think it's the answer is Primary Authority is one of those answers, most definitely. I think it's a really effective way of bringing about compliance, not just on when you go and inspect, but actually long-term compliance with businesses. And if we can recharge a reasonable rate to get our money back, why wouldn't we want to be involved in that? So I think absolutely that's. And myself and Justin actually have been, I think, probably discussed this previously. I think it is definitely an area where we can recoup costs, and it can be a really effective way of bringing about compliance. So we want to be certainly looking at that again. The other one, just to re-emphasise, to answer your question, but also to re-emphasise a point that Stuart made, is I think that goes also into some of the other business support products and services that we offer. This is the discretionary stuff. There's always that competition against, is it statutory, so why are we doing it? But actually, if it's discretionary, sometimes that can be the best way to bring about long-term compliance, not just the inspection and catching people out, but it's actually to encourage people to do the right thing, comply with the law in a really positive, proactive way. And again, we can charge for that. But that takes, as we know, it takes investment up front, and then ultimately to get that, we can then get money back in. But we'd be very happy to work, I think, hand in glove and a lot closer with the fire service to maybe develop some of those business support products and services alongside Primary Authority.
I can I just add, I've got a feeling, Councillor Alvey, that maybe what was being referred to there might have been risk assessment or getting involved in writing or developing risk assessments for businesses around fire. I think we could get together and put our heads together because similar thoughts have been expressed in terms of food safety management systems and health and safety risk assessment. You know, there can be a feeling that actually that has to be done by the business owner or operator. I think there's some sort of room there for manoeuvre actually, and maybe we can have that conversation with fire.
Yeah. Thank you. The next question is from Dominic and then one from Matt, and I think both of those you've just covered in your long answers. Which I'm not critical. They were brilliant answers, but you're anticipating what we're going to ask you. Dominic, I will come to you in case you want to pull anything else out from that.
You're right. So I'll just invite Stuart to answer this, and you can be concise. We understand that being a unitary authority brings some unique benefits to Cornwall Council within the Primary Authority scheme. Could you expand on this, please?
Absolutely, because you know what we're trying to offer is a joined up single point of contact access to regulatory service support. So whether that's planning or fire or building control or all the things that we do, it's a clear, or fire safety, of course. It's a massive advantage, isn't it, to be able to offer all of that to businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now to Matt again. I think you've expanded on this already, but I will come to Matt in case you want to tweak out to pull out anything more, Matt.
Yeah, mine is short and sweet, but there we are. How can we improve our primary authority scheme? I think you've already covered that, but if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
I'm going to leave that one to Stuart because he's better at doing the concise answers.
Well, we've done a lot. We've created a needs assessment phase of primary authority where we go in and work with businesses and agree joint objectives that both parties sign up to. I think the improvement, we've probably got a couple of, I think, misapprehensions or worries amongst regulators, and I've just mentioned a couple about, well, who actually is supposed to own and write an assessment of risk. Maybe we can have a little bit of a workshop on that focuses on those issues and resolves them. I mean, Nick Kelly will talk about this possibly later if you ask him, because I know within the food safety team there have been one or two concerns about, well, are we doing this for businesses, or should they do it themselves? How far can we actually take that responsibility away from them? So that there's sort of some common thoughts, I think. But I think we could work together as officers to understand how we can improve the whole package to, in the end, to support businesses who are coming to us and asking us, could you help me to do this?
Yeah.
That's
great.
For.
That's great to hear, my love. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Did you want to come back again, Matt?
If I could, yeah.
Yeah.
I do think, I think, and you guys will agree with me, that the business support thing that licensing set up has been an outstanding success. Yeah. And I think, how we can evolve that throughout the other, services we provide within the council is something we should be working on. And I think on that sort of level of it, that was all I could add to that, really.
Thanks, Matt. Right now, the next question is from John, please.
Yes, thank you. Are there opportunities for communities and the Public Protection and Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service to work together and share resources to release capacity to undertake more fire safety audits? For instance, in relation to the petroleum and explosive inspections and sorry.
I'm going to leave that one to Stuart. I know he's probably got more detailed knowledge of the for that.
Possibly, it's something we could talk about. I mean, in a previous authority up in York, the trading standards were actually the fire authority and the explosives authority. So I've got some knowledge of that. We do go on to premises where sometimes explosives, fireworks in particular are stored. We obviously go on to petrol sites to do testing of petrol pumps under the weights and measures trading standards remit. There's possibly some joining up there. Whether that would be best confined to a hazard spotting approach is maybe the sort of question mark, and to what extent, looking right across the board, have we actually got capacity between us, additional capacity to do full inspections? It is, but I think there's something, there's some commonality there. We're going to similar premises, looking at risk. It's one that could be explored.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that's something to, as you say, to look into. Thanks, John. Right, the next question is from me. This is to Alan, really. I think we've always been very impressed by the way you've run your own service with income potential, where you're doing almost cost neutral on lots of different jobs and roles. So, from your own services experience, can you advise of any potential income generation opportunities for Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service?
Yes, I think is. I mean, interesting enough, going back to the beginning, really the fire and rescue service have been involved with our journey as well, and have been, I think, been key partners. But I do see, in terms of, I think, building capacity and generating income, I think to continue to support the hub, so that really simple, easy access route for businesses, a one-stop shop to come through. So for the fire service who have previously supported that, that's the first bit. Let's all, if we're all part of that same hub and support that hub, then the products and services that the fire service could deliver are much easier to get access to, and we can join things up. And equally, I think we could work together even more closely to really make sure we've got a good suite of products and services that business really want, based on what businesses tell us. But that takes a bit of investment up front, so we have to sort of invest. It's virtually invest to save. Yeah. So I think to expand what we can, how we can offer different services and products, we need to work that through. And when we have those, then we can properly advertise them, properly make them available on our website, through the hub, and promote each other more through just visits that we undertake. So I think there's more that we can do if we work together to generate income to pay for those very services, most certainly. And we've mentioned one, obviously primary authority is a key one. If we work together on that, but we actually invest in it, then we can recoup more back from it. But it probably takes that leap of faith to do that. And I know that can sometimes be difficult to do. So we are certainly stronger together. We have a better brand, better reputation together. So I think that's probably the key. If we stick together on it and use each other to promote, to cross-sell and upsell, as well as making sure that we are eyes and ears, then I think we have a better reputation, better brand that we can put out there. And actually that means in the end we get better results, better compliance, and more trusted.
Thank you, Danny. Yeah, I mean, you've proven that it works, haven't you, in your own directorate? So that's good. Martin, you put your camera on. Did you have a question?
Oh no, I'm up next.
Oh, sorry, right. You're just being prepared. That's good. Yeah. Right. The next question is indeed from Martin, please. So over to you, darling.
Slight change of direction now. What are your views in relation to the regulation of short-term holiday lets? And are you aware of any potential future guidance that might be being developed?
Okay, I am going to start on this one, but simply because I mean, actually, the last time myself and Justin properly got together was in a trip up to Plymouth, where we were being specifically consulted by Airbnb on the way forward for whether they need to be regulated in a different way. So so I do have a view, certainly, that there is a gap in the market at the moment through short-term holiday lets. If you're talking about the likes of platform providers like Airbnb, yes, I think there's a gap. I think there's more that could be done. Personally, and this is what both myself actually and I think Justin, strange enough, put forward to the consultation event up in Plymouth, was we feel that there's probably a need for a registration service for those holiday lets, so that we are aware that they are there. And that's the first part to making sure we can properly enforce and ensure they come up to certain standards. So a registration scheme, certainly, so we know that they're there, and then we can from then identify whether there is a need to inspect or give advice to the highest risk of those properties. And as part of that, I would hope that that registration scheme, there would be a charge applied to it, which could give us a little bit of capacity to then do something about knowing that those places are there, or to respond to complaints when they come in. So I think there's an opportunity to build a little bit of resource or capacity to deal with those if there was a decent registration system in place.
Thanks.
Sorry, are you aware that there's any future guidance coming back and being developed, Alan, on that?
I am. My understanding it was that Airbnb had been asked by the government to, or certainly undertook some consultation with a view to going back to the government. And I think the way they were looking like and sounding like they were going was that they were going to suggest that some type of registration service might be on the cards. What happened then is I think COVID got in the way. So over the last 6 months, let's put that off. So whether that we after the whole pandemic dies down, that is likely to come back into play. I hope it would be the case, because the growing area of risk that's
anything else left?
I'm just going to ask Stuart if he had any thoughts to add to that. Or
no, I can only, I know there was local interest, and Visit Britain also keen on a registration scheme. There's a registration scheme in Scotland, as I'm sure you, or parts of Scotland, as I'm sure you're aware. So yeah, I surmise with Alan that it's actually the pandemic which has derailed that seeming sure direction towards some sort of registration oblique licensing.
I guess from the government's perspective, there's an incentive in pure tax terms, because clearly if these places are registered, they've got more chance of picking up on people who are generating an income for which they're not paying tax. But yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Martin. Right, the next, we're almost at the end, you'll be glad to hear, gentlemen. The next one is from Dominic, please.
Okay, thank you. I guess probably Alan can answer this one. How do the objectives of the inquiry's terms of reference affect your respective service?
Sorry.
So yeah, I was hoping you've been given these two in advance. How do the objectives of the inquiry's terms of reference, so hopefully you've got the terms of reference somewhere in front of you, or perhaps Stuart's nodding, so perhaps he wants to answer, affect your respective service? So this is something we're asking everybody around, what we're looking at and how it affects your day-to-day life.
I think I had a sort of simple answer to this one, which is just to refer back to that single regulatory system. So it's clear, that the way the objectives are addressed and dealt with through this process bears directly on our service. If there are holes in some parts of the system, then it affects us all, doesn't it, across the board, and vice versa, in my opinion.
Fine, that's adequate. Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy to add to that, but you may have run out of time. But
no, you're okay, because we've. If you want to come into it, that's fine.
Yeah, maybe just to be more specific as well. I agree with what Stuart said, but if in terms of those objectives, if, for example, we get the resourcing wrong within fire, or fire do, then some very specific knock-on effects can take effect, and including things like the fire service being a statutory consultee to licensing. Well, we still do need those responses for licensing to make sure we've got an effective way of putting conditions on, for example. Equally, in terms of things like events, if there isn't the capacity to, and obviously resourcing is one thing, if there isn't the capacity to give that advice, because that is discretionary, it is proactive, but it's really important. So we do need that capacity to make sure that we have fire safety advice on all the key events. So if that withers away or is not enough, then we won't be getting proper rounded advice and support from fire colleagues. And the final one there, I think we've probably laboured it enough, but it's in terms of the business support. Probably the most effective way to get compliance with businesses generally is through providing support and advice in advance. and that is always strengthened if we can do that in a joined up way. So if that's not there, then that overall, as Stuart said, the overall regulatory system is weakened significantly.
Worth labouring. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final question is from Matt, please.
Okay. If you could put forward 3 or 4 recommendations to the inquiry that would support your service, what would they be? And importantly, why? There's just something to think about.
There we are. I feel like I've got some things written down. I wonder whether that would be the case. You've probably heard most of them, but Stuart, would you why don't you go first on this one? And if there's anything, if we don't get to 3, then I'll come in.
Okay. I mean, I think we do need to collaborate more actively to make the best use of our collective resources, whether that's intelligence and risk data or enforcement capabilities. So I'm thinking in terms of proceeds to crime and RIPA, so surveillance skills, to equipment. I've mentioned the RIB on the file that we can share. So I think that's one. I do think we can do something to share our business inspection priorities and to try to map these against one another, you know, notwithstanding all the complexities of software systems. So for example, you know, as I've said before, food safety officers, sorry, can check and report back on fire safety risks in food premises. I'm not sure whether, I hope this is within the remit of the inquiry, but you know, one of our top priorities is protecting vulnerable people from scams and hoarding. And I think the fire and rescue service could utilise its capacity to pick up on those sorts of safeguarding priorities as CPP resources are under strain. At the moment, we tend to use resident volunteers to bolster that sort of work. So maybe there's a joining up there. Yeah, and then there's the one on primary authorities, isn't there? I think we have mentioned that quite a lot, and that's to, if we can have some certain dedicated sufficient capacity there, I think there's a heck of a lot more to come from primary authority in respect of supporting businesses and who are, you know, really asking for fire safety advice and support as part of that bundle of business support. So there's a few there.
Could I just add one then, if that's all right? I know we've probably gone over 3 or 4, but there's just one, and which is probably just consistent with what we've been saying all the way through, actually, and that is what I think is really important. The business support and advice, I think, is critical for me, and that's an area where we could be self-sufficient as well, because we can charge for it. So for fire service to be actively involved in supporting and delivering our hub offer, so our business regulatory support hub offers that single point of contact, and then from there also developing those a broad suite of products and services to support businesses that are consistent with what we have for other parts of regulatory services, just to continue with and maybe expand upon that, I think is really critical for us. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Dominic, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, sorry for the time, but I think it's worth asking. So you've touched upon the primary authority scheme being best cost neutral and maybe even, you know, revenue earning. And you've touched upon the fire service not quite having the capacity to deliver the full range of suite that's possible. So how do you envisage the resource? So could how would you envisage the fire service resourcing that? Would they or do you start employing you know, more green book staff for the fire service that could do that sort of work? I just wondered how the money flow would start from the customer through to the fire service with you in between.
I don't think we necessarily need to be in between. I think we just have to work hand in glove there. And where it normally works is that the customer, the business that wants that primary authority, would pay on an hourly rate for work that the fire service done for them. The issue we've got is we've got a bit of a chicken and egg, which is without the right resource in place at the moment, we have to probably, or the fire service have to say, we haven't got the resource to take on another large firm who wants half a full-time equivalence time over the next year. So there's probably got to be a little leap of faith to say that do we need to invest in maybe 1 or 2 members of staff who could possibly do that, knowing that over the space of the next year, we'll probably get plenty of asks from businesses who would then be able to repay their salaries through obviously through those charges. But yeah, we might have to be brave to invest up front. Otherwise, you have to keep turning people down. The one other thing with primary authority, sorry to go to delay it, but is at the moment we've got a lot of primary authority arrangements where it's virtually as a pay-as-you-go arrangement. So it's quite minimal. It might only be £1,500 a year that a firm is just getting some ad hoc advice. And we need to move a lot of those to, look, let's have a programme of work that brings about improvement, which means there's more investment needed to be made, but where we can spend a decent amount of time with you to get things right. And I think we've got to shift a lot of our primary authority relationships to a more programmed, longer term relationship like that, which will bring more income, more certain income in, and therefore we can base the need for resources on that a little bit easier.
Okay, thank you.
That sounds really helpful. Gents, thank you so much. That's been really interesting. I know we've gone a little bit over time, but it was fascinating to hear what you had to say, and also very positive. And I think it's working together is the answer, really. So that's great to know. I mean, we're all one family, aren't we? Really, that's the benefit of the fire service being part of the council. We're all working together. So can I thank you both very much, Alan and Stuart? I know how busy you are, so I'm really grateful you had the time to be here with us today. If you want to stay, you're very welcome, but I know how busy you are, so if you need to go, that's also okay. But thank you very much for your time. Okay.
Thank you, Carol.
Excellent.
Thank you, darling. Now, we're scheduled to have a break now. I'm quite happy to continue. Does anybody want to stop for a 5-minute break? No? Okay, well then we will. Sorry, Martin, did you want to stop for a 5-minute?
No, just saying I'm fine to go on.
Thank you, Danny.
I've just had an email from DPD. So if I disappear for 2 minutes, it's because there's a man trying to push a box through my letterbox.
Okay, sweetheart. You take care. Right, so then we will just carry on if that's okay. As I said earlier on, Glenn Kaplan has let us down, so he's not going to be here. But I'm very grateful that Nick Kelly and the ones that are coming after him have been brilliant and moved their slots forward. So we're very grateful for that. Otherwise, we'd have been sitting here twiddling our thumbs for half an hour. So Nick, thank you, my darling, for being here. It's lovely to have you with us. And we'll start off with your questions, if we may. And the first one is from Dominic, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair, but I haven't got it in front of me yet.
All right. Do you want me to read it out for you?
You can do.
All right. This is me. I'm being Dominic now. Can you tell us whether you feel the current working relationship with Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service assists you in delivering your respective service objectives and priorities?
Yes, certainly. And again, similar to Alan, I'll just give a little bit of context to that councillor rule, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
So, I have several dealings with the fire service in the course of my day-to-day role. So primarily, it would be in terms of event safety. So I chair the steering group for event safety planning, which is around making sure that the event safety notification system we've got in place that supports the local safety advisory group is running and operational. Justin actually sits on that with me on the steering group. The key aim of that is to identify any barriers that we've got to the system working and to make improvements as time goes on. So certainly in that respect, there's a lot. You've also heard a lot about the primary authority scheme. Within my team, I have a lady who is the primary authority manager for Cornwall Council, or primary authority partnerships manager, who liaises with the fire service day to day. So in terms of the answer to your question, yes, there certainly is a lot of interaction day to day, but also the risk system or risk priority system in place is suitable.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm sure we'll expand on that other questions. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. And the next question is from Matt, please.
I think this has already been answered, but there we go. Do you feel the level of engagement from Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service is adequate? I think you've answered that. So if not, how could it be improved?
Okay, so I just, if I can ask a question back to Councillor Rule as Chair, am I answering this in respect of event safety or primary authority as well, Carolyn?
Both, I guess, in a way. I mean, your role, I think, is more events side of things. But if you've got any comments to do from primary authority side, that would be helpful as well, because we can collect all the evidence. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you. So in terms of event safety, primarily there's two functions where I would say the level of engagement is important. First one is on the steering group, and certainly we are represented on the steering group from fire safety. There is a lot of input into improvements in the system and the barriers which we have to overcome to improve that system. Secondly, it would then be when an event is notified to Cornwall Council, it goes out to essentially the safety advisory group members, and the fire service are certainly members of that safety advisory group. So there is certainly scope, I would say, for possibly along a similar theme to what we've already heard around capacity. And I would specifically reference where an event is given to a member of the fire service to review and to look at. At the moment, a standard letter goes back to the event organiser, and within that letter is sort of links to guidance, good sound fire safety advice in terms of events. And then for the more high risk events, a particular officer, wherever they're stationed, will then look at that event. We have had some challenges, I would say, and you know, I've certainly with just around where officers are dealing with a specific event for that communication to ensure that it comes back through the safety advisory group, so that the chair of the safety advisory group is certainly discharging his responsibilities in terms of ensuring the safety of the public at events. So I would say on the whole very good, but I think certainly communication in terms of events, and particularly I'm referencing the communication through the safety advisory group to make sure that all communications go through that, would be an area for improvement.
Thank you, my darling. Matt, did you want to come back on that, or is that okay?
No, I think that's excellent. Good.
Thanks, Nick. Next question is from John, please.
Thank you. What benefits do Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service bring to events, fire safety, and also the working of your team within Cornwall Council?
Okay. I think both Stuart and Alan, certainly from what I've overheard, have talked a lot about the trust that the fire service bring. I would go a little bit stage further, and I would say it's really the brand that comes with it. The brand of the fire service is a really, really good brand. It's trusted. There's a lot of respect for it. I often feel that people feel very safe and secure with them, particularly being a blue light service as well. So reputationally, I think they do an awful lot of good for us, both in terms of event safety and the wider workings of my team. I won't go on and repeat what's already been said about the primary authority scheme, and certainly other than to re-emphasise just how many businesses are wanting that advice from fire in terms of their fire safety compliance. In terms of the other day-to-day dealings with my team, Councillor Simons, I know that we have run joint training sessions for both fire officers and housing officers in terms of to look for when out and about on inspections. So we're already doing a bit of eyes and ears, and I think when you turn up to an inspection with a member of the fire service, there is that instant, I don't know, any form of confrontation which may go just disappears because of that safety and the security that they provide. So I'm trying to almost provide a bit of an emotional response to that as well, that it invokes in people.
Yes.
I think that is true, isn't it? You feel safe when they don't feel threatened at all, which obviously you wouldn't do. But I mean, it does help, doesn't it? Thank you for that. That's good to know. The next question is from me. How could the sharing of information between the Event Safety Steering Group and Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service and your team and Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service improve?
Okay, so I have already alluded to probably the primary concern that I would have is to make sure that all communication comes through the safety advisory group. It's very easy, I think, particularly when we are all very busy, when you're having a conversation with an event organiser, to not relay that information back through the safety advisory group and to make sure that all members are aware. It's very easy to overlook, and whilst in realistic terms it would be auditable, I think just speaking to the chair of the safety advisory group, he would really welcome for that communication to come through formally. Again, I won't re-emphasise or go over the points that have already been made around joint sharing of data through a shared system, but certainly that would be helpful if it was feasible.
Thank you. That's really helpful. The next question is from Martin, please.
Thanks, Chair. And does the Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service allocate appropriate resources to support the work of the Events Safety Steering Group and also your team?
Okay, I would say certainly in terms of the Event Safety Steering Group, there is adequate resource. When the events go out to individual members for comment or for scrutiny, I think it's difficult for me to be able to say for certain exactly what happens with that, because I'm not obviously au fait with exactly who's looking at what and when they're looking at it. I would say that sometimes the consistency may not be there, but that's probably due to operational reasons. And I think if we were looking, certainly, I know we'll come on to it at the end in terms of recommendation for a level of events we are going to scrutinise. So almost to have a priority basis for doing so, and then setting the resourcing allocation to cope with that demand.
Thank you.
Sorry, I keep forgetting to turn my microphone back on again. Thank you for that, Nick. The next question is from Dominic, please.
Thank you, Chair. So are there opportunities for your team to assist in identifying fire risk in premises through the work that they undertake? And if so, could more be done?
Yes, I think, to be fair, I know Stuart has alluded to it already in one of his answers. We have trialled systems whereby we've put sort of basic fire safety checks, for want of a better word, onto our inspection pro formas. We have run some training sessions for staff. I think, if I'm going to be brutally honest, there is a little bit of fear that people may miss something. Certainly fire is one of those areas which, there is a risk, or can be a risk there if it's not managed correctly. We do that already to some extent, but I do think it could be further developed.
And so how do you think you might overcome that trepidation amongst your staff? How could you build their confidence in this area, perhaps?
I think, again, with things like this, the only way to build that confidence is through training and to actually go away and do it. And again, in an ideal world, it would be under some form of supervision. We're not in that ideal world, but I don't think there is that capacity to do it under supervision. So whether it's just a case of slowly or gradually building that level of compliance checks we do, would probably be the initial starter.
Could that be a bit of a two-way street? So, well, I take it you're hinting that if there were more involvement from Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service in your training, then there might be more awareness in your staff to fire risk and more confidence in reporting it. Absolutely.
I think you've hit the nail on the head.
Thank you.
We can put that down as a recommendation. That sounds good, doesn't it? Right. Sorry, I'm not preempting what we're going to end up with. Sorry. Right, Matt, next, please.
Okay. With regard to the primary authority scheme and partnerships, it is the level of engagement and support from Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service adequate?
Yes, that's a good question. Certainly the level of engagement is good. I think again, you know, and again, I won't go over what's already been said in terms of the scheme. I've spoken with the primary authority partnership manager at length this week regarding sort of fire's input, and at the moment we've kind of got made some rough notes here. We've got five really active primary authorities with fire who are pretty much predominantly there because of the fire service. They are really good and working really well. There has been some ad hoc work from fire into sort of 4 or 5 of the other relationships we have. We are aware at the moment that there is a lot of interest in terms of what fire service could provide for some of our primary authority partnerships, but at the moment that resource just isn't there up front to be able to firstly scope what work is actually there, and therefore I think then secondly to be enable for that resource and capacity to be there to deliver it. I have had some comments back again from the primary authority partnership manager in terms of, I think, the timeliness of communications from the people who are in the post working on primary authorities. And again, I think it was a point that Stuart mentioned earlier, which I think would help and certainly enable that, is that continuity of people in the post. So that rather than, I think at the moment there's a very sort of cyclical nature, and I think it's due to operational reasons in that people will come into the post and then will move out of the post sort of 8 to 9 months, maybe 12 months later. And I think it would really help us in terms of that engagement and that level of work if we could keep that continuity or somebody continual in that post.
Okay. Could I come back with a secondary cast?
Yes, of course.
Is that down to actually bodies, you know, doing the work, or is that down to IT solutions, or is it that a bit of both?
I think it's probably less to do with the IT solutions. I think it is actually the capacity within the fire service to be able to respond to requests firstly, sort of the way that the primary authority partnership works is that there will be interest in a particular function or area. That then requires the sort of business needs assessment that Stuart spoke of earlier to be undertaken to identify what that work is. And then I think once that's been identified, it's then getting the agreement from both fire service and then the partner organisation as to what that work is, and then actually being able to deliver it. And I think we're kind of stuck at that sort of moment in time that Alan was speaking of earlier as well, that we're kind of, there needs that leap of faith in order that we can get the people in to actually start looking at the work, identifying what it is, and then actually being able to meet the demand as well.
That's staffing mainly then?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you, lovely.
Okay, thanks, Matt. The next question is from John, please.
Yes, thank you. I understand that being a unitary authority brings some unique benefits to Cornwall Council within the primary authority scheme. Could you expand on this, please?
Yeah, and again, what I won't do is reinvent what's already been said, if that's okay, Councillor Simmons. I think I can only speak really on personally from the primary authority partners, particularly the national ones that we deal with, where we've been to meetings with them, and I would say that that is one of our absolute unique selling points. And I think what really helps that is also the close working relationship we have with the fire service.
Yeah, that's right. And you have got a very close. I mean, it's really close.
Yeah.
Great stuff. The next one is from me, and really it's more of the same. It's talking about this, trying to tease out more from this primary authority scheme. So how can we improve our primary authority scheme? I think that you've touched on it several times already, but do you want to sort of have one last go at that one?
Yeah, I think I won't bring anything new to the table, Carolyn, but okay. Certainly I think for us it's when we are being asked by a primary authority partner for that fire safety advice. One of the key things that our partners look for us in is that immediacy of response and making sure that we can respond quickly to what they need at that time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's in two elements. One is where a business may have had a poor fire safety audit elsewhere, or something may have gone wrong and they need that immediate emergency response. But I think secondly, where a business is looking to do something proactive, it's about us getting our sort of ducks in order as quickly as we can internally to be able to respond. And I think at the moment, due to capacity, that's being really challenged.
Thank you, darling. Right, the next question is from Martin. We're almost there, Nick. The next question is from Martin.
Thanks, Nick. I think we're on to the questions that you've got advance notice of now as well. You'd be pleased to hear. How do the objectives in the inquiry's terms of reference affect your respective service and the events safety steering group?
I think they're very, very closely aligned. I don't see any missing, certainly put it that way. And again, I would just reiterate the point around sort of the capacity needed for that sort of response, and to make sure that all communications are timely and through the correct channels, particularly in terms of event safety. And I know it's difficult. You are sometimes with short notice sort of asking questions, and there are other operational demands.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. And the final question is from Dominic, please.
So if I could just start, I'll just start with a supplemental to Martin.
Yes, of course.
So I think what we're teasing out of you is that for it to be successful, the primary authority scheme needs to be very commercial in its outlook. And so is it in your experience then that if people aren't given timely advice, they will go elsewhere for those services?
I would say, you know, we haven't seen that to date, but I would certainly say that would be a risk that we would run. If we're not being timely in our response, then they will start to look elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. So the final question is, if you could put forward 3 or 4 recommendations to the inquiry that would support your service and the event safety steering group, what would they be, and more importantly, why?
Okay, so I think if we can split that into the 2 separate areas, if that's okay, Dominic. I think starting with the event safety, I think for myself, one of the recommendations would be for officers where they have an event allocated to them would be to look at the wider implications of not just the event, but things surrounding the event. So we have several probably very key events throughout Cornwall each year whereby roads are closed, there's a lot of people in the roads, and I think it's not only looking at the fire safety risks with the actual event, but then the wider impacts of that in terms of how would you get blue lights through those streets and through the people, and where needed to channel any of those sort of concerns or potential risks through the safety advisory group, rather than going just directly to the event organiser. It's mainly so that firstly we can acknowledge that those risks have been identified, and then secondly to make sure that they've gone through the correct channels. Certainly the communications through the safety advisory group is one that I've reiterated time and time again, and it's not just in terms of the wider implications, but also in terms of the smaller things as well. So I think that's probably it in terms of fire safety. And certainly in terms of primary authority, I think again it's my main recommendation would be in terms of the capacity and having that leap of faith, so that we can make sure that we are getting back to our primary authority partners in a timely order.
Okay, no, thank you. That's come out well through the evidence. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nick. That's come to the end of our questions. So thank you very much for your time, and also for being so helpful and coming in earlier than you were planned to be. So I'm really grateful for that. Thank you, my darling. Again, as with Alan and Stuart, you're very welcome to stay with us for the afternoon. But if you need to get off, that's also okay. All right, my love.
Thank you.
But thank you so much for your time and for your input. It's been really interesting. Right, we now move on. What's the next thing? Just look on my thing. We've now got a break scheduled. I think we will have a 5-minute break now, if that's okay, and then we come back and talk to the Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service officers that are lined up. They're coming in early as well. So it is now 14:26 by my computer. So if we come back again at 27, it's just to make me out to be a fibber. If we come back at 2:32, then if that's okay, please. So we have 5 minutes. So see you back again at 2:32. Thank you very much.
Chairman, it's Jo Heather, Democratic
Yeah.
Services, just to ask everybody if they could turn their cameras off and their videos off, please,
Yes,
because the recording will still be running.
Yeah, we will all do that. Thank you, my love, and see you again in a minute. Right, good afternoon. It's now 2:32. Hopefully we can start up again now. That will be really good. Can I welcome Graham Hughes and Des O'Connell and Darren Vincent. Thank you very much for your time, for attending here this afternoon, but more importantly for coming on earlier than you were expecting to do. I'm really grateful that you managed to free up your diaries to help us out like this, so thank you very much for that. We've got several questions for you. I don't know whether all three of you will probably want to answer them, or whether just one of you at a time. Is entirely up to you if you think it's not relevant to your area. I think some will be more specifically for one more so than another, but if we run through them and tease that out as we're going through, if that's okay. So the first question is from Matt, please.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find me questions.
You got it, darling? Would you want me to read it for you?
If you would like to do that, please,
Okay,
Caroline.
yeah.
I can't find the right page at the moment, sorry.
Don't worry, my darling, I can do it. So the first question is, can you each tell us about yourselves and your roles in Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service and how you fit into the structure? So perhaps if we go from my screen, if we go from Des first, if that's okay?
Yep, that's fine. Good afternoon, all. My name is Des O'Connell, Cornwall Fire and Rescue, obviously. I'm currently a station manager, flexi duty manager within West Command, and my functional role is with protection, prevention and road safety.
Thank you, Des. And then perhaps Darren, I'm just working across my screen as you're there.
Yeah, good afternoon all. My name is Darren Vincent. I'm currently a watch manager in service delivery of protection in West Command, and I work under Des, who's my line manager.
Right, and then finally Graham, please.
Yeah, good afternoon all. My name's Graham Hughes. I'm a Green Book Fire Safety Inspector for the Fire Service, covering obviously Cornwall and a bit of the Isles of Scilly. I'm also a Petroleum and Explosives Officer. Been serving as a Fire Safety Officer about 17 years, so possibly the longest serving officer, and I'm based at Penzance. Des is my line manager, and I do carry an enforcement remit for Petroleum and Explosives.
Brilliant. Matt, did you want to come back with anything else on that, my darling, because it was your question, really?
Yeah, could you just, Graham, just out of interest, could you explain the explosive thing to me, please?
So, in reality now, obviously when I first started, the quarries had a lot of explosives as well. They don't now. It works differently now, where somebody just comes in and does a job and goes away again. So it's predominantly fireworks and small stuff. We only license up to 2 ton. Anything outside of that's HSE, and petroleum is predominantly petrol stations, the fuel installations. It's a bit like I'm a building regs officer for petroleum installations. I have to agree what they propose or any material changes or what they want to build, because if we don't, they won't get their license basically. So it's a bit like, they consult with us. And
okay, thank you. That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Dominic, you
questions now.
Thank you, darling. Dominic, you wanted to ask.
Yeah, just a slight bit of clarification, because we're all on a learning curve here. I understand what Graham just said. Des and Darren, are you both? Do you both classify yourself as fire safety officers?
Okay, so myself, I kind of have quite a few hats, if you like. I'm service delivery, so I'm a supervisory officer for operational incidents, etc. I also have a remit and responsibility over some stations within the West, and then I kind of have a functional role, which is what part of that will be protection.
Right. Okay. And Darren?
Yeah, and for my part, yes, predominantly fire safety, but due to the fact that I'm grey book staff, I obviously have to maintain my operational competence as well, and also because I'm attached to a whole-time station, i.e. Tolvaden in my instance, I also provide support to the operational watchers there under the fire safety remit, and operational at times.
Okay, thank you. No, that's thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dominic. Right, the next question is from John, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad Matt was first, because I couldn't find mine either. Can you tell me? Can you tell us the number of fire safety officers and fire safety enforcement officers, how is this structured?
Okay, so predominantly the service, we have a policy team at our service headquarters, and that structure is three personnel. It consists of what we call a group manager, a station manager, and a watch manager. And then from the service delivery side, which is where I sit, the three commands, the west, the mid, and the east, have myself, which is the lead in the prevention, protection, road safety. And then I will manage in my command 3 protection officers, which are the watch manager level. For me in my west command, I have 2 grey book, which one you see there is Darren, and I have 1 green book, which is Graham. And that's kind of how the structure sits, and it's repeated throughout. The only difference to that would be in mid command, they have the 3 grey book watch managers, but the east reflects the same as the west.
Okay, and there's only 2. It's only separated in 2 in Cornwall. Is it east and? So
we have west command, the mid command, and the east command. So the 3 commands.
So it's 3. Okay, all right, thank you.
Right, it's me next, please. Can you tell us more about the differences between green book and grey book staff? I noticed you've got one of each here. How do the 2 categories of staff interact? And in your opinion, is the balance correct between the 2? So it's probably to Des, I think.
Okay, yeah. So so the difference between the 2 primarily will be the operational commitment. Graham is an on-call firefighter as well, but in regarding our full-time operational duties, we would have our operational side of the job that enables us to keep compliance, so we can be used for operational incidents as well as for protection work. Whereas purely for the green book side of the fire safety element or protection element of Graham and his petroleum explosive, it is kind of his 9 to 5 day job, if you like, within the service. I guess the disadvantages and advantages that I see with it is the operational firefighter will bring that sort of greater knowledge of fire in itself and dealing with fire, because it brings that operational element and local knowledge to the job, if you like, as opposed to maybe the green book staff. But I suppose a negative to that would be the keeping up with the compliancy and the competency of the vast work that the modern firefighter has to deal with in the modern world. So that part of training is something that they have to maintain as well as doing their protection role.
Thank you. Dominic, you wanted? Sorry, did somebody else want to come back on that? I beg your
pardon.
I
was just going to add to that, you know, the difference you asked about the differences.
Yeah.
So, in reality, certainly the green book's more cost effective, and there's better resilience with the green book. Forgive me, but earlier listening in on the previous conversation, the green book stays in post theoretically, and operational staff, uniform staff, are obviously being pulled all over the place. And like Des alluded to, green book, you know, they stay there. So that's a clear difference.
Yeah. Thank you. Dominic, you wanted to ask a question on that?
Yeah, no, so it's quite interesting in that Graham is green book, but also a on-call firefighter. So is that something that's replicated in the East, or all your green book staff also? Because I mean, we have a very high number of on-call staff in Cornwall. So is that something that's replicated, or is Graham unique in that fact?
I don't think there's many. I think I'm possibly unique. It's not a requisite by any means.
No, I just wondered if it was something that's common.
No, I joined as an on-call firefighter in '99, and I got this job in 2003. So no, they're very different.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you do bring a level of operational competency to the role, then?
Yes, but I think that's purely accidental, as opposed to
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Next question is from Martin, please.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, one of the bits of confusion that is now starting to clear with me is I had it in my head that Green Book were non-uniform, Grey Book were uniform, and Graham sat there in a uniform. So that way of telling the difference has gone out the window. My question is, can you each tell us what your view is of Cornwall Fire and Rescue Services risk-based inspection programme, whether you think that the appropriate number and type of premises are being audited, and whether frequency of visitors is sufficient? And you know, please feel free to be honest. I know Justin's listening in, but please feel free to speak frankly.
I mean, yeah, for me, obviously the risk-based inspection program prioritises known risk. You know, starting at the top and obviously to the lower end of the risk scale, and rightly so. To be fair, we know that we haven't managed to percentage-wise get around many premises, perhaps in comparison to national figures. So. Is it sufficient on a basis of national figures? No, I don't. I feel it's not. But we've only got so much capacity, haven't we? So with the capacity we have got, it's probably, in my view, targeted in the right places. Unfortunately, that does mean then that we don't get a chance to perhaps audit in groups where we perhaps have got a good idea there may be non-compliance, but if we're talking about life risk, then those places aren't at the top of that life risk or in the risk-based inspection program. So, unfortunately, it means we don't get out to those when really perhaps it would be nice if we could. That's, and maybe we should, thinking about what Cornwall is based on, which predominantly is tourism, so. And we haven't got a risk-based inspection program for petroleum or explosives. So I won't. I'm trying to create one, but we haven't got one in place at the moment. So unfortunately.
Thanks. As Des or Darren, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, just to reiterate really what Graham's saying. I tend to agree really that I think, essentially we are carrying out our regulatory activities in terms of auditing in the right places to a point, albeit quite clearly the statistics show that we are, maybe a little behind the curve in terms of what is being achieved nationally. But then to build a little bit on what Graham was saying, and I think it was touched on in some of the last previous recordings there, about self-catering and the holiday lets, and obviously Cornwall is a tourist county, and probably at the moment we are very reactive, and that's not a criticism, that we are very reactive to things that come in relating to that sector, rather than actually maybe going out and sampling some of these premises and just to see how well they are complying with the fire safety legislation. So it's something that we could develop going forward if capacity allowed it.
Thanks, Darren. Des?
Yeah, so currently our risk-based inspection program, we have 46,000 sort of non-domestic premises falling out, and I think the 1,600 high-risk ones, that is a lot to get around. We currently audit around the 400 mark, but the very nature of the way we're going with sort of the fire safety, maybe the awareness of the general public, the more sort of complaints and challenging new builds, the change into safe self-catering, way people are changing their houses and their businesses, puts more demand on the service, and I guess the frequency of us being able to audit that where we want to be perhaps auditing that is clearly challenging.
Thanks. Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to put my microphone back on. I'm here chatting away and the microphone was muted. Thank you for that, gentlemen. The next question is from Dominic, please.
Okay, with your indulgence, Chair, I'm going to start with a supplementary question to that last one, which I'm going to address to Graham. So you identified to us that you don't currently have a risk-based programme for petroleum and explosives. So in your professional opinion, how bad an emission is that? Is that something we should be looking at? And also, are there any national models that you know of that could be perhaps pulled off the shelf to implement it?
Is it a bad emission? We know about it and we're trying to address it. That's so, yes, I've sat here and said that, but we are aware and we're trying. Like I said, we're trying to create one, or I am, but and that is based on. I'm a member of a group called PELG, which is a national group which promotes best practice for petroleum and the petroleum side of my role, and that's done through incorporating a whole host of national groups, whether it's enforcement officers, people from the actual business sector, the HSE, the Energy Institute, and then that information is disseminated through what's known as PETEXs nationally. And out of that, I've got like a risk-based, a risk-based pro forma, if you like, Excel spreadsheet that I can put information in, and it comes out with a risk rating. And so as we're going inspecting installations, I'm feeding it through this pro forma, and then obviously CFRS is being updated with a risk rating, and that will hopefully, then will determine risk inspection frequencies. So then, and it's done on risk. So a potentially very old tank that's full of petrol in the ground that's only single skin and been there for 40 years, as you can imagine, is far higher risk than a brand new double skin tank that's gone in the ground last week and is managed by a multinational company. So those, and whether they're by schools or water courses or anything, so all those go in, and so we're getting there, and hopefully then that information CFRS should hopefully decide whether it needs to be 12 months, 18 months or 2-year frequency. So yes, it's an emission, and yes, we're getting there, and yes, I've got something that I've almost pulled off the shelf and they're using. It obviously has to be county specific. We haven't got the underground running under our petrol stations as London has, so there's slight adjustments I've had to make, but it's working and we're getting there, and yes, we will get there, I'm sure. But the reason it's not fully in place is, again, capacity. I'm a fire safety officer as well, like I've said, probably the longest serving one. And if I said to you that when I started, I was probably 65-70% petroleum and explosives and 30% fire safety, the reality is today that I'm 90% fire safety and only 10% petroleum explosives. And I am the only, that's not strictly true, there's 1.5 of me, but it's predominantly me, and I'm the only enforcement petroleum and explosives officer in the service. So it's just proving difficult to suddenly get it all done in one, quickly, basically. It's just, and
so the area you're working with, petroleum and explosives, we understand is something that you work quite closely with the Cornwall Council Public Protection team, because they do the licensing around it. So would the risk-based programme benefit the council as well as the Cornwall Fire Rescue Service?
Well, sorry, right, okay, so just to clear that up, the local authority obviously has the statutory duty to be the regulators for petroleum explosives. However, Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service, we are the regulators. That was determined, agreed, 20, 30, 40 years ago, I suspect. So we do the licensing. We are doing all of it, everything. Would it the trading standards who could obviously do it under the local authority direction, they would have to do the same as I'm doing. They would take everything perhaps and do it. The money side of it, there isn't a lot of money in it, I can assure you. You'd just be moving the problem I'm assuming to possibly one under-resourced, lack of capacity department to another one, and then you'd have the training issues maybe, I don't know. So we do it all, sorry.
No, thanks for expanding on that. So back to my question, if I can find it again now. So this is, again, a question, be as frank as you like, and I think to each of you. In each of your views, is the most effective governance in place in relation to the service delivery team through to the pup protection leadership team? So it's a governance question. I'll go to you first, Des, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay, so I think we'd benefit from a functional department. I think the nature of the protection, the fire safety, the skills that you need to obtain and the amount of training that it takes to be sufficient and compliant within that role, it means that you need to stay in post perhaps longer and look at perhaps a longer sort of career pathway within that sort of skill, if you like. And I suppose where we are at the moment with our service delivery, if you take my position, you have other skills or other parts that you need to focus on, and that would be very priority led. So that could be larger scale incidents or different management issues on particular stations, etc., etc. So it's hard to focus, if you like, on that one skill, and therefore we would potentially look at or benefit from a functional department. I guess the negatives for that is when you start your career as a firefighter, it's an element of your skill, and you perhaps wouldn't be tied from that very start of your career to go all the way through in one element of the other skills. So that potentially can be a negative because some complement each other, if that makes sense.
Your microphone's off, Dominic.
Sorry.
That's my microphone's off. So we've heard a lot about the primary authority role that the council offer, the scheme. Do you think a more dedicated functional service delivery team would help assist with that side, the primary authority scheme?
Well, yes, it would give more focus to that and more consistency in a particular role that was chosen to assist with that function. That would definitely work. I think sort of going, and I hate to keep using the word sort of resources or capacity, but I think it's the workloads and the work streams that come down in varying areas. It makes it difficult for us to perhaps operate solely in protection all the time, and that's predominantly in my role. It may not be the same for Darren or for Graham. It's, as sort of the practitioners at the other end, because of those demands as well, it does mean that my sort of rank, my level does have to partake in a fair bit of practitioner work as well, which is not ideal if you're trying to manage or distribute or sort of work with other partners within that role, if that makes sense. No,
perfectly. Thank you very much. Darren, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sort of like repeat everything that Des has said and go overall, but I think I would agree really that we probably need to be a little bit more focused, especially in a something as specialist as fire safety, where you literally cannot just parachute people into that role and then to hit the ground running. It just doesn't work that way. But I think also if the people that maybe not so much at my level but above could focus more on that, and rather than having to sort of like keep quite a few other plates spinning at the same time, so to speak, that would probably aid us all round in the for the common good, really, if I'm honest.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say, excuse me, I don't want to repeat anything, but I would agree certainly with Des that leadership at Des's level, there are just too many responsibilities and so unable to focus properly. Agree. Unfortunately, we've agreed there's perhaps a lack of, because they may not be in post for too long, so that's a lack of resilience and consistency. And unfortunately, my view, one of the reasons for that potentially is that the Green Book is just not, we're not put in management positions, or I'm not. There's only me and one and a half, if you like, but because for me that would create consistency and resilience if a non-uniformed or Green Book member of staff with the right knowledge was put in a management post. I mean, at the moment, you potentially have got people in management posts who don't know anything about petroleum and explosives, which again, is an issue in itself, isn't it? So, but that's just capacity. We just don't see that. And I'm sorry, I know I've said that 2 or 3 times, but it's true. It's absolutely true. It's everybody's being pulled, it seems to me, from 6 million different directions, you know.
So, you know, if you could wave a magic wand and have the finances to advertise for such a post, are there people out there who, you know, who could apply for such a job? I mean, you know.
Well, I don't know about that, but I think the key is we perhaps do need to, what Des said, we need to be a functional department where people are focused and stay in that department and don't have to worry too much about, you know, everything, perhaps the operational side or you know, so on and so forth. And obviously we were listening in earlier, you know, and it probably would allow for a bit more time, consistency and resources to be allocated to the other groups, like, you know, like LSAG that the gentleman was talking about earlier, and just and even the public, you know, provide a bit more time and effort to help the public if there's a need for it, like you, which obviously I think we probably all agreed there is, but it just can't we just can't do it at the moment. There's not either, I don't know if it's not enough of us, or we just, because we've got so many, wearing so many different hats, and of course the further up the management chain you go, the more hats you're wearing. So
but it's that capacity of people who haven't got an operational role that can focus.
I don't you don't need an operational role, background to be a fire safety officer. We have all, none of us were fire safety before we started. We've all been trained, and it takes time, obviously, and it does take time. So it's just the hazards associated with fire, petroleum, explosives, they do sit well with the fire service, because that's what we do, isn't it? You know, it's but you know, if you're just because you're, I would think just because you're a Green Book member of the fire service doesn't mean that the operational part doesn't rub off on you, because I'm sure it does. You know, we work on fire stations, so currently anyway. So you know, it's you just do, and you're getting all the inside knowledge from the troops. So good.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Dominic. The next question is from Matt, please.
Right, I'm going off tact slightly now with this question. Des, this one's for you. Can you tell us about your work with the Isles of Scilly, please?
Yep, certainly. So currently we assist the Isles of Scilly in the protection element. There is a Section 101 agreement drawn up which allows us to provide some chosen time to the island to assist them in their protection, basically. So that enables us to look at their risk-based inspection program and provide audits for them to maintain the high-risk premises in fire safety. We're able to do the enforcement if required on the islands, and it also enables us to handle or consult their building regulations and planning applications and alike in that field. So that's something that we do. We also have been able to, and it worked quite well. Sorry. That's fine. It worked quite well during the sort of COVID period, and it's one we did it actually before COVID. We physically went over there and assisted business with surgeries to try and give an open surgery, allow the public to come in and assist them with their fire safety knowledge regarding the regulatory reform order. But suddenly COVID allowed us to do the same thing, but via virtual, as we're doing now, Teams, webinars, and that worked really well. And that's quite a positive step forward for us to assist the islands in communicating to people there. And we also have the petroleum and explosive element as well, which Graham gives the islands that support as well in an enforcement capacity and an inspection auditing capacity as well.
Okay. is that mainly because they just physically haven't got the resources and people on the island to do so then?
Yeah, so we kind of carry the enforcement authority element to them. I mean, predominantly the islands is very much the on-call kind of the on-call sort of operational element of the island, and they haven't got that capacity or knowledge to have those posts in place. So it makes perfect sense to use your neighbours' facilities to be able to provide that support with them. What we're able to give them. I mean, we have the training, the knowledge, the skills that would probably wouldn't be time or cost effective for them to train an element of people for the amount of property that they would have to deal with at a high risk level.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask a question on that one? Is there a service level agreement or something in place for this? Because that must have implications on your resources and your financial implications as well.
Yeah, there is a service-led agreement that has been organised before me, and I have a period of time or hours. And roughly speaking, I'm equating to roughly 24 days in a ballpark figure. It's broken down to a number of building, like say 20 building regs a year, and we have a sort of a parameter, if you like, to the work that we would give.
Right. And that works, does it? Or is
that's accounted for. Well, to actually answer that question correctly, COVID has not given us a proper opportunity to value that, because it's fairly new to certainly my post. The previous year, yes, we did give ourselves a week, if you like, 5 days on the island to audit, which was sufficient, no different to the sort of percentages that we're auditing on the mainland. And we have had the element of building regulations and planning come in, which has been within that service-led agreement. So that would work. Currently, because we can't get to the island, we have a plan to do what's called a desktop audit, which is not as good as a physical inspection, if you like, but it's a way that we can use this kind of technology to at least have some kind of monitoring on a business, and we have a number that we plan to do throughout the winter to sort of catch up.
Yeah, we saw one with this inquiry. We had a virtual, one of your colleagues went to the Parkhouse Flats in St Austell, and that worked quite well because he could show us all the different things. I know we're not experts like you are looking at things, but you would know what to ask to see, and they could show you, I guess, on the camera, couldn't they? Yeah. Certainly. Right, thank you for that. I'm sorry, that was a by the by. The next question is from John, please.
Yes, thank you. It's for Graham, but I think you've answered half of this question really. But could you tell us about your petroleum and explosive inspection role? Do you believe this is the best use of Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service resource, or could it be done by the Communities and Public Protection Service in addition to their current chargeable element of this service?
Yeah, like you say then, okay, so I suppose two parts to that. What do I do, which I've predominantly answered, but I mean, I carry out inspections, obviously, if we're just talking about the petroleum inspection side, to ensure the safe storage of petroleum and explosives and make sure there's compliance in line with legislation and guidance. And that's, like I say, within Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, as Des has alluded to. I have an enforcement responsibility for that and a prosecution responsibility if required. But obviously we receive applications to license explosives and issue certificates for petroleum installations, so process those. With the explosives, there's quite strict requirements that they have to meet, and quantities and so on and so forth, so we scrutinise those when they come in, and then go and inspect for new applications, make sure we're satisfied, and if we are, then the new certificates go out. Provide advice. Petroleum installations have a legal duty to consult, as I've alluded to earlier, if they want to make either what's known as prescribed material changes, so that would be anything that affects the tank storage, the pipe work, any of the dangerous sides of the installation, if you like. Or if they want to knock down and rebuild one, or if they just want to build a new site, they have to consult, we have to scrutinise it, make sure we're happy. If there's bits we aren't, I make comment on it, and we hopefully put our heads together and we come out with a solution, and then hopefully it's built as per agreed and they get their certificate, and that is our way of saying they're complying. Deal with complaints and concerns. So I mean that can be that somebody might just phone up and think that something's not safe on a petrol station, or even from trading standards, because trading standards will do the weights and measures part of you know, making sure that when you're paying for £1 worth of petrol, you're getting £1 worth of petrol. And sometimes they'll feed back to me saying they think something's not right on a site. So obviously, again, that becomes a priority. So off we go and do that. And like I say, to try and help make sure that we're doing it right as a service. It's not about me, obviously, it's about the service. I am part of this PEL group, which is a national group that promotes best practice. It's a group of people, and the aim is to provide, you know, promote consistency within enforcement authorities. So, which is quite good. Do I think it's the best use? I think you said of the fire services resources. Yeah, I think that's. Or should it go to trading standards? I'm really understanding that's what you're saying as a chargeable, as part of their chargeable element. Well, on the chargeable bit, for me, it's the local authority, isn't it? So it doesn't really matter who's charging for it. You're not going to get any more money whether it's trading standards or us charging for it. And I don't really know that I could say whether they've got the capacity any more than we have to do petroleum and explosives. But what I could say is, you know, storing petroleum and explosives, it's all about reducing or eliminating the risk, you know, of fire and explosion ultimately. And, you know, if anything does go wrong, how best to contain it and minimise the risk to people or the wider community. And, you know, the fire service that's what we're about. So for me, you know, it sits well with the fire service. And I would think maybe whenever it was agreed that the fire service within Cornwall would do that, which must be, you know, I've been in nearly, let's say, 17, 18 years. A guy that I worked with that retired a few years ago, he'd been in 10 years before that, and it's always been the same, and there was someone before him. So we're looking at 30, 40 years ago this was agreed, and one can only assume that the reasons were because it was felt fire and explosives and volatile compounds or substances are better sat with the fire authority. So, you know, whilst the amount of resources we've got to deal with it may have decreased over the years, I think the principles haven't changed of perhaps why it was with the fire service, and certainly the risk, you know, that the petroleum and explosive pose, they haven't changed at all. So, you know, my view is it's probably better sat with the fire service, and it's under the umbrella of the local authority now, as it happens, you know, because we're a unitary authority and everything now. So I just think maybe, yes, you could go and move it to trading standards. Would there be any benefits? I can see some negatives, the cost of retraining somebody and going through all that process and everything. And really, are you just then, like I said earlier, moving perhaps a capacity issue from one department that's struggling to, for all I know, another department that may be struggling as well with resources. I don't know. Like I say, I don't know how trading standards are at the moment, but you know, we're trying to, in a way, we've always, I'll use the word manually, tried to collect the fees associated actually with petroleum and explosive licensing. But of recent, we're now just in the throes of starting to streamline it, and actually next year would be the first year whereby we're starting to use. We've agreed to start using the council, you know, a department in the council that does invoicing and debt collecting, and so, you know, in a minute, instead of us trying to issue things almost manually and then me being the one, which is obviously I'm the enforcement officer, chasing people up because they perhaps haven't paid, you know, in a minute that's going to be streamlined and just all done automatically, which, you know, is a great leap forward for us. I have to say, it's you know, it's a good step forward, and that would all, you know, and if it went to trading standards, they would only do the same. So, you know, I don't know if it should sit with trading standards. My view is not, just the very nature of what we're talking about here, you know, petroleum and explosives, but that's for the local authority to decide, I think.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Martin wanted to ask a question, please.
Yeah, just a quick one. Graham, do you know if, by chance, in Devon, where clearly the Fire and Rescue Authority is a separate authority to the county council, because they're clearly not unitary, does your opposite number in Devon work for the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service or Devon County Council?
Right, forgive me for not knowing specifically for Devon, okay, but it's what I can tell you is obviously nationally, it's split. It might be 60-40, okay, towards trading standards, okay, but so no, it's not all with fire service and it's not all with trading standards, and I mix with both, obviously, on the national circuit. So.
I use the Devon example purely because, being a neighbour, I thought that if you knew anyone, it would be your opposite number in Devon. But so really, the answer is that there is no set rule on it, and actually, there are U's in both fire authorities and
well, like I said, it's a local authority statutory duty to regulate it, and how that's determined. You know, we've been regulating it before we were linked, as we are with the council. You know, it's not only fire services that are under the umbrella of their local council or their county council. It's definitely not that. I think it's what was been agreed between, you know, say the council and the fire authority many years ago. You know,
I see. Thanks. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. The next question is from me. This one is, can you each tell us how much of your time is spent between maintaining operations, managerial responsibilities, and your fire safety roles? I know you're going to be different because you're doing different things, but if you could each tell me that would be really helpful. So perhaps Des first, if I may.
Yeah, okay. So that can change weekly.
All right.
That can change. It depends on the priority, like I alluded to earlier, and that is based on many things, whether it's a particular high rise of incidents that I may have to report on. It may be due to something like an accident investigation, some internal politics and grievances, disciplinaries, or so that can vary my focus or my capacity to push towards the protection element. I do feel that the demands on the service or the workloads that we have now, if I was to balance, a lot of it is protection, and really I would think from where I sit and what I'm trying to focus on in other areas, that probably is too much, to a high percentage of protection only. And I just think that's where we are currently at the moment, to try and keep up with the demand. And the reason I see that in my command is just perhaps unfortunate that we've been through a spell where we needed to train up and get protection officers as watch managers up to a sort of standard or competency in order to maintain that auditing that we needed to do, and that's just the nature of where we were at that time. So certainly we're aware of it, and internally we're looking to address that, and by that I'm hoping there'll be more sort of succession planning and more career pathways, that we shouldn't be on that sort of catch-up element, which would give me more time to focus on perhaps managing protection and prevention, road safety within our operational crews, as opposed to being a practitioner.
Yeah, I suppose succession is important because it takes so long to train the officers, doesn't it? Yeah. Thank you for that, Des. Can I come to Darren next, please? Same question.
Okay, I think, you know, for me, probably a minimum of 80% of my time is spent doing the fire safety role, which, you know, is what you would probably expect. But obviously, like I said earlier, you know, I am grey book staff, so I do have a not just an organisational but a personal responsibility to maintain operational competence to the best of my ability. And what I would say is that, you know, if I could set aside 20% of my time, which is quite generous really with the current workload to do that. That's probably where I am. I do my best to do that, which is usually achieved by either supporting operational crews when they've got shortages, and also various core skill courses, and obviously all my compliance courses. It's not a perfect world, but it's a way of sort of balancing my time. But my primary role is fire safety, and if I didn't focus more on that, then I would really get snowed under with the work, if you like, so because you have to keep chipping away at it, so to speak. In terms of management, currently, albeit I'm a watch manager, in my fire safety role, I don't have a formal managerial role in terms of I've got staff under me. However, I do, obviously, by virtue of that, attached to a whole-time station, provide that support to the operational watches there, particularly, like I said earlier, from the fire safety and the operational side, but obviously particularly with the fire safety side, where they will come to me for advice or queries, etc. But it also works both ways as well, whereby I will get work that comes into me in my protection role, whereby it might well be that I can task them with that. So it's kind of that managerial bit, if you like, is quite informal. That's how I feel, but it is kind of there, if you like, by default.
Yeah, thank you, darling. And Graham, finally, yours, I suppose, will be slightly different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd like to say I'm an on-call firefighter, but that's a separate role and a separate job. So I'm 100% fire safety in some way, shape or form. Like I said, perhaps when I first started, I was 65-35 in favour of petroleum and explosives, but now it's definitely 90% fire safety and 10% petroleum and explosives. I'm not saying that's right, but just fire safety has a lot of deadlines, and something lands in your inbox, you've got to deal with it. So and that's what's happened where we are. But I'm 100% fire safety.
Thank you. A lot of it's reactive, I guess, isn't it? What comes
it is.
So,
yeah.
Our role's a bit like that, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Right. Next question is from Martin, please.
Thanks, Chair. Do each of you feel you receive adequate training and leadership support?
Shall I? I mean, I'm happy to start if it's each of us. Fire safety training. So the fire safety order, I feel it's good. It's relevant, and leadership support, comes in various ways, but it's good. It's there. When I say various ways, it's through policy and problem sharing and so on and so forth. You've got people to bounce stuff off. But petroleum and explosives, I've already said I'm pretty much the petroleum and explosives officer. I'm not in a management role, which means that, and I'm the only one that knows anything realistically about petroleum and explosives. So how can I have sufficient leadership support if nobody knows about it outside of me, if that makes sense? So, from that aspect, no. But certainly for fire safety, yes. I
guess when you're in a pretty much a digital role as you are, and a very specialist role, a lot of your line management probably don't fully understand what you do. But in terms of your currency, for example, to maintain your currency, is it easy to say to the line management, look, I need to go on such and such a course up the line to maintain currency about whatever, and are you able to do that?
I mean, I wouldn't say I wouldn't be able to do it, but because it's sort of, for want of a better word, we're firefighting as a service. We're firefighting petroleum explosives, so you're not getting the chance to even perhaps be fully aware of what we should be doing or what CPD I should be doing. If we think fire safety, we should be doing 25 hours a year CPD. I'm not saying you need to do 25 hours CPD for petroleum explosives, but there needs to be some, and perhaps proportionate. And we're not even sure where to get all of that, if at all, So I'm not saying they don't support. I'm not saying leadership don't support. I'm not saying that. They're definitely there if you need them, but it's about understanding obviously the subject we're talking about as well, isn't it? And you know, obviously that's not quite happening.
And that in a way was my challenge to you, because you are in such a specialist role, and I imagine a changing role as well in terms of national standards and systems and indeed the types of explosives and fuels that people are storing. That if you went to your line management and said, look, I need to know about this because there's an awful lot more of this in Cornwall now, you're confident that you would be able to go and get that training?
I'm sure, yeah. If I put the case forward, they you know, they would trust in me, and yes, if I said I needed it, without a doubt, I'm sure I get it. Yeah.
Thanks.
You know, definitely, yeah.
Good. Darren, next perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say personally, my experience of the training and development has been very, very positive. I'm quite new to Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service. I'm only just embarked on my 4th year, having been in Devon and Somerset for many, many years. And, you know, I shown an interest quite early on that I wanted to diversify, so to speak, and specialise in fire safety after being ops for a long time, and I have to say that's been really well supported in terms of the fact that probably by beginning of this part of this year, I'd only really been involved in and around protection for about 2 years. So within 2 years, I'm up to the standard of level 4 diploma, and I'm now fulfilling all work streams within that protection service delivery role as well. And obviously, there's ongoing training and various CPD events. So I have to say, my own personal experience has been very, very positive in terms of development. Very steep learning curve, I have to say, but it's been very, very beneficial, and hopefully not just me, but more importantly, the service get a really good return on their investment, if you like, in that.
Thanks, Darren. And Des?
Yeah, so agreeing a little bit with Darren there, that certainly what we've got in place has definitely improved, and I feel that we do fulfil the right courses and the right accreditation of qualifications to a point. I don't think we should underestimate the experience that goes with fire safety. It's not just about going away and getting that ticket, if you like, that knowledge. There's a wealth of experience, knowledge, mentoring that needs to support that. And I do feel that we're in an age where, sadly, with Grenfell Towers, the inquiry and the fire safety bill, and certainly designers, architects, they're pushing boundaries more and more and more, and it's a very fast evolving and challenging sort of regulation and guidance all the time, and it's one that we need to keep up and maintain. That's challenging for the service to keep that up, and it probably leans more towards that functional role or functional department, as opposed to jumping all over the service, so to speak. I've been in 26 years within the service, and I think my grounding knowledge was better when I started out in the subject in fire safety, and I think we've lost that a little bit, and one that I know that the senior management has perhaps recognised and would want to bring back, and it's how we resource that, the capacity to bring that back and get that training across our operational crews, because I think they can assist us in some of that auditing for the future. But unfortunately, we need to get them up to a standard to support that functional protection team that we kind of have in order to sort of eat up the work, if you like, and spread it more evenly across the service, which would give everyone that better grounding in the subject.
Thanks, Des.
Okay. Could I just ask one small question of Graham, if I may, please? Do you find that you get support from the national group that you're part of? Because talking with colleagues,
yes.
because it is such a specialised
Yes.
role you're in.
Yeah.
You bounce ideas off each other there.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I'm honest, that is the key to me, trying to keep up to date with stuff, and then obviously practicing it out in the field. It's just a shame, it's not about me, is it? It's about the local authority, and with only me doing it properly, if you like, that's quite a vulnerability, and I feel that I should be able to, well, perhaps if we were functional, so the fire safety officers, no reason for me why the fire safety officers can't have a basic knowledge, and certainly just a simple inspection knowledge of petroleum and explosives, and unfortunately we just don't seem to be able to do that. So and that's more what I'm, if we could, it would be much better for the fire service, for the local authority. So,
well, I guess there's a vulnerability there, because if heaven forbid you got poorly, is there no succession planning? Anybody else that's being trained or that has a knowledge of that? I suppose that maybe needs to go to Des, does it, for that? I don't know.
In respect of the petroleum explosives?
Yes, yeah.
There isn't currently anything there to replace that.
I suppose it's resource again, is it?
There would have been the 2 petroleum explosives, but as Graham alluded to, that's sort of 1.5 now.
Yeah.
But it obviously
that would be resilience.
Yeah. So could the half, whoever that is, would they be able to take on the role? They would understand it, would they?
Yes.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
So there is a little bit of protection there, right? Thank you. The next question, sorry, rattling on. The next question is Dominic, please.
Thanks very much. Thankfully, Graham looks fit and healthy, so hopefully isn't a problem. So that's who to put this question to. I'll try you, Des. So how much resource does prosecution process take? How much resource does the prosecution process take? And generally, is resource an issue?
So enforcement and the prosecution element, obviously, there's a great deal of training that would be involved in that to make sure that obviously the legal process, the bundles that's be created, that make sure that we're sound before we even start. So that's an element to that. Then regarding the actual sort of prosecution or going forward, a lot of that work would ultimately be with our fire safety staff that you have there to sort of create the audit, find and score the premises accordingly, and they would then ask for that support of the enforcement officer. Then collectively they would put together, if you like, the bundles to go forward. That's the time-consuming bit. I think actually tying up diaries, prioritizing that, probably more so for the enforcement officer because they generally are the sort of station manager and above currently, with those other hats, if you like, to tie that up, to get those bundles going forward, is time consuming. I feel we do have a nature which is good in lots of ways, that we do support business to try and not enforce so much. So that again is time consuming for our serving inspection officers. So we work very much with the business to try and keep them compliant. And so to both give time, but certainly the prosecution element is a lot more that goes into it. I'm currently not an enforcing officer, so I only see what goes on, and I can imagine what's involved with that.
Okay, thank you.
Right, we're almost there, gents. Thank you for your patience here. The next question is from Matt, please.
Right. How do the objectives in the inquiry's terms of reference affect your respective service? I suppose Des and then work on.
So we're probably some of the stuff going over some old ground, but certainly the larger amounts of workload that's coming in. I think I alluded to, sort of unfortunately the Grenfell Towers. It's put fire safety back on the map, if you like, or higher rated, and the sort of level of complaints and the change of, certainly in Cornwall, the change of community sort of towards self-catering. You've alluded it to the Airbnb platform, but that kind of stuff is creating us more and more demand. I think also, and I perhaps should have said it earlier, from a building regs point of view, we're all aware of what Falmouth, the student accommodation, it's getting much larger, more challenging, more expertise may be required for us to be able to consult. We do have a facility to share, perhaps with Devon, but we need to get better at that ourselves, and it's probably an opportunity for us, and I know that's on sort of the radar, that we use our own partners, within our own building control, and have that support and share to train and be able to deal with that more challenging stuff more professionally, if you like. Yeah, I think events was touched on before. Certainly, I feel we've all felt the effects of the Festival of Cornwall, if you like. The greater events that are coming to the county, it's certainly increased our workload in that sort of arena. Some events are getting very large. If you look at your Boardmasters or your Loo festivals, and the time it would take our officers to look and support those people in making those events safe. So it's creating a lot more work and demand, if you like, and sort of drawing our focus away to other things purely during the summer months, which will have a knock-on effect to our audit capacity, without a doubt. And that's just the way things are. So there's some great sort of things that have come out of my level by sort of going into safer town meetings, being part of that, or being part of police meetings, and that sharing of information has been valuable in lots of ways. But it also does give us more work. It does find those more vulnerable people, which is great. It's the right thing to do. It's really important, but it just increases our risk-based profile, if you like, to do more protection work and more safety. So yeah, that's kind of where it is for me.
Darren or Graham, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, obviously we got sight of those two questions prior to today's session. So I did prepare something not quite as comprehensive as Des, I might add, but you know, in terms of reference, you know, I think they're both very, very relevant. And firstly, I think the current assessment of risk is in the right areas, which I obviously did touch on earlier, albeit the fact that we are, as a county, have a high number of self-catering holidays. I know I mentioned this earlier, but I feel we should maybe at least perhaps explore that area of our premises, certainly in terms of our auditing activity, you know, to be more proactive, perhaps, based on Cornwall's profile, really, as a tourist county, as I said earlier. And secondly, I think most of what we do is driven by resources, the dreaded R word, and that ultimately shapes the various outcomes. And many of our activities are fed from external sources in terms of consultations, such as, so we have to deal with them as they come in. But obviously this then can sometimes, you know, affect other activities, because obviously we have to meet those deadlines. And obviously I know deadlines has already been spoken about. So that really does then go back to impacting on our ability perhaps to do some of our re-inspections and the frequency in which we go back to premises off our risk-based inspection program. So it's a bit of a vicious circle, really. But, you know, in terms of, you know, the terms of reference, very, very relevant, I think, to this inquiry.
No, I mean, so yeah, for me, I hope, you know, the outcome will provide evidence as to whether we are or aren't, you know, inspecting in the right areas and allocating the resources we do have in the right areas. And, you know, if the answers to that is yes or no, then hopefully there's some recommendations, whichever way they are, and on how to move forward. I'm hoping that is what's going to be an outcome, or how it's going to affect us more, if that makes sense. So everything else has been said, I think, really. You know, maybe some more joined up working will come out of it if it can work, but again, requires capacity, doesn't it? So, yeah.
So if I could say, for instance, the insurgence of Airbnbs and self-catering stuff within Cornwall now is causing a worry within the fire service, as it's not been at all registered, sort of serviced, as it were. That can going to be an ongoing worry then.
Yeah, it would be great if we could be proactive and go out there and do some sampling instead of just attending only when we've had a complaint or a concern. Yeah. You know, yes, that absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Thank
you. Yes, thank you.
Right, now the final question, gentlemen, please, is from John.
Yes, thank you. If you could put forward 3 or 4 recommendations to the inquiry that would support your service, what would they be, and importantly, why?
Where do you want to start?
Do you want to go first, Ed?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
So for myself, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I would like to further see some training focused back to the start of a firefighter's career in regarding this subject, and I would support probably more the operational front line being more involved in the protection element, and that enables them to have a grounding, and not only a grounding but an ability for the service to reach out to more sort of aspects within Cornwall regarding protection, but also enable us to be a bit more consistent and easier to continue their development and go into the protection field if it required, with a better grounding. I think the part of a functional department has its benefits with consistency, and being able to utilize that knowledge and experience, and also that functional department could also provide other partners within that department from sort of, for example, from building regs or from other places to support that going forward. And without a doubt, I think the one thing we've learned from our COVID period is the technology to support our administration, to support our ability to reach out to people more through the methods like this, and to also capture our training. They're sort of key things really, and recommendations that I would support.
Okay. Darren?
Yeah, I mean, very much what Des has already said, really, in terms of my ideas, if you like, albeit expanded on the one to do with the operational staff. I mean, my suggestion is that all operational staff were upskilled to level 3 certificate in fire safety, because that would reduce some of the current burden placed on protection staff, whereby they could assist with certain work streams, carrying out audits in premises which have got a reasonable history of compliance. So take some of that off the specialist team, so to speak. But also, speaking from personal experience, I mean, obviously that would also bridge some of the current gap in knowledge from ops to protection when staff first joined the team, because it's only now that I realise how little I knew about fire safety or like the protection world when all I did was as an operational incident commander, if you like. And that would definitely now is like a bit of a missing bit of the jigsaw, if you like, that how I would definitely approach operational incidents differently in certain circumstances based on what I know now in my current role. So I think there's a huge benefit in, if nothing else, we upskilled the operational crews to a higher level of fire safety competence for their own safety and and everybody else's, but also to support the organisation and the specialist team within it.
Yeah, for me, I think when we're talking about consistency and stability and so on and so forth, and resilience, I think I'd definitely try and change the balance. It's disproportionate balance between the Green Book fire safety officers and the uniform fire safety officers. It probably stands at 6-1, maybe 5-1, 6-1 at the moment. And obviously, in light of the fact we're going through a proposed structure change, which is obviously going to happen in some way, shape, or form very soon, start incorporating non-uniform Green Book staff within the protection into management positions to help stabilise and create that resilience and stability, rather than for some reason they seem to have to be uniform staff, or there's just a reluctance, I don't know. But for me, I think that would help some of the issues we face if there was more Green Book staff, and perhaps they were put in, especially if we became a functional department, which I think we're all agreed would be better just all round. So
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dominic, you wanted to ask a question.
Yes, thank you. I just want to ask Darren, You referred there to level 3 fire safety. So how onerous is that, and how achievable would it be to get all staff through that?
That would be quite an undertaking, I have to say. And when the service started, like when I started to do my fire safety qualifications, we had an outside provider into the service exact to provide that course. My understanding is now that we have been moving towards being able to perhaps provide that course or get accreditation to provide it in-house, which I guess would be more cost effective, and maybe we were able to get through more staff at a more faster rate, really. It is quite a step up from like Fire Safety Foundation. I would compare it with going from GCSE to A level, really. If I'm honest, it's quite a step up, and and I can, like I say, speak from personal experience, but it would definitely improve the base knowledge of our ops crews, certainly in their operational role, but also when they're out and about doing their protection work that they do at watch level. But also it would then lend itself to perhaps being able to expand that remit a little bit to support us in the protection team.
So you definitely believe it has an operational benefit as well as a fire safety benefit?
Absolutely, yeah, they go hand in hand, really. And like I say, it's only now that I realise how much I didn't know when I was just working off a foundation qualification previously.
Okay, thank you.
Can I sort of expand on that a little bit, Darren? Do you know the current ratio? How many people are up to that level 3?
What, within our service?
Yeah.
If I'm really honest, I couldn't give you a figure. I know that I believe there's been 2 or 3 cohorts that have gone through exact, which would probably be in the region of a dozen people on each occasion. But I'm giving rough figures here, okay. Probably. But I know,
look into, yeah.
Yeah, and I know there was I believe a desire that all crew and watch managers should at least be, would be at least trained to that level. But what level we are at the moment in terms of progression with numbers, I'm not really sure.
Okay, we can get that found out probably and filter it in and feed it into the inquiry details. Right, well, thank you all so much. It's been really interesting this afternoon, and as I say, my grateful thanks for coming earlier than you were expecting to do. So that's been really good, and a lot of good quality stuff coming out. I think very interesting. I've been scribbling notes here as I've been listening to you, and I'm sure Joe has as well. So thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate it, and this is of the inquiry for this afternoon, so thank you and goodbye, really. I guess hopefully see you again soon. All the very best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Joe, can you advise us, do we need to come off this link thingy or and go to a new Teams meeting, or can we just stay here?
I'll turn the recording off and then we can stay here.
Thank you.